were supposed to ask Pitty how much testing needs to be done in terms of flavors, and what are a minimal set of tests.
Very good point.
So that's the big question. What's the minimum level of testing that he feels comfortable with?
Right.
And he was talking to you about that yesterday.
So I do have some idea of what he said in answer to that, because I've actually talked to him today about it.
Well, why don't you move up front?
I'm really happy here. You have to twist your neck, which was funny for me. He was basically saying his key concern is that if we ship an update and it goes onto my machine, if it won't boot, if it won't go to X, if it won't do networking, or it won't start Update Manager, then there's no simple recovery. If those four things work, then it doesn't matter so much if we mess something else up. So much. Because it is at least recoverable.
Right.
So the thing he wants to know is that those things will be tested, at least for a minimum subset of systems. He felt that we needed to test the normal bootable kernels for x86 and AMD64, and as much else as we could test, but those were the key ones.
At least that give you some like less burden to or a bigger number of kernels you could test in the time period.
It also would be good to know what sort of representative set of machines to run it over. And do we need to run it over everything, or we can do like 20 for display, but 20 for the solid play?
He didn't mention anything in those terms. I can't think of him. For myself, I would have felt that we care most about the commons.
Yeah, but he was maybe saying something about like 30, 50, some rough number.
Because I think we've got, what, 50 systems?
We got like servers, probably more than we got like 90 servers.
Right.
Have you checked?
Lots.
I can tell you, just give me a second.
It doesn't matter.
But some
The key ones is that we cover the common ones is the most important for mine.
Common should include a vert scenario too, because we have had SAN regressions and things like that.
That's
That we don't notice until it gets into the real world.
Right, I think vert is important, given quite how many cloud instances there are. I don't think Pitty cared so much about those. Vert, whatever vert, KVM, whatever it is. I mean, we have one kernel nowadays, mostly for all virtual use, whether it's KVM or whatever.
The juice thing? The juice thing? Just the operating system? Or just?
No, I'm talking about the virtual place.
Okay.
we do that at the moment.
We test on VMware. We might test the KVM. I don't remember.
That's a
But
start.
I think we do test those.
I mean, that's definitely a start.
So how do we define what is the most common?
So we got like 125 clients.
So I don't know how to answer that.
Like 30.
That's a statistical question. I'm not really good at those.
Is it the most common you hear about, or the certified systems?
Well, it brings the definition to be able to determine if like what we happen to have on hand is good enough, or whether we need to have an outreach to people in the community to also
So
assist
we
in
have-
having good coverage.
Mark, so we have virtual set runs the scripts on the launch button. Looks up of I guess tags that we can raise one and the hardware in that. So if you like what's the most common within that. That would be
actually
what
tells you what's most commonly broken, fix it.
but it may be like this terminal, the most commonly broken. Maybe it's the most commonly
It could be, or we might just look at rubbish. I mean, we just don't know.
I like it. It's a starting point.
Is there an action item for somebody to you get that list?
Yeah,
I think that's a nice
start
start.
at the default for someone in my team to work out what are the most common hardware that like we need that also for other purposes.
So if you want it from the hardware database, I just ran it last week.
Yeah.
So I'll have the link to where the copy doc.
And sort of that's the starting point, to know a common, what is the common base of machines to test on. Second, what would be the minimal,
We need to get agreement from
yeah,
Pitty in a formal setting
right.
of
Sort
what
of
is
like-
the minimum amount of machines he's willing to set with a minimum flavors and a minimum test.
Right.
And I've tried to give you a hint of what I think he was saying to me, but it really needs to come from him in. I sign off on this set of tests as being adequate. I mean, it's not an easy thing for him to do, but I feel that's where we're at. So he needs to say, we need at least this much doing, and then we can start to work out how much we can actually do, and how long it'll actually take. Because we might not be able to do it in a week if he says, I want you to do all the tests 48 times on 48 machines. So, which I'm sure he won't, but you get my point.
Oh, we have been involved with WT.
Yeah, we sort of made an assumption of what his answer will be and moved a little further on, but
What outstanding issues are there?
So one thing we were talking yesterday was regression testing versus certification testing, right? So I wasn't too sure we concluded that. And I can speak of certification testing and doing this minimum set of tests, but not really need to do more than that for regression testing.
Well, yeah.
I think we're contending there should be no regressions in the certification tests. Right?
Yeah, so that's one thing. And so doing additional regression testing to check things that are not hardware specific.
You guys don't have the capacity to do that.
Like, my team doesn't do that, but a little more interesting. They may not have the ability to do that.
We have verification on the bugs that are the individual bugs.
Yeah.
And the gist of the cert regression testing is to make sure that stable updates haven't regressed something.
So we're trying to do the maximum amount of normal things to see that those normal things continue normally.
What is contained in the certification tests? So I guess we need to specify that certification tests include a whole host of manual tests which are not scoped for this, because then we wouldn't be able to do it whatsoever. So the automated tests are things that are very hardware specific. Do you have can you give us a brief overview?
Top of my head, I can't go through every single test off the top of my head, but mostly it's pretty low level stuff like, well, obviously, did the system boot, were the expected devices detected, was the, are certain expected services running? Unfortunately, a lot of the really interesting tests are manual, so things like, does the display work? We can see if X started up correctly or in fail-safe mode, but it's kind of a human confirmation thing to see if the display actually came on. If we test for networking, presence of X, unless it's a server, certain services are running that sort of thing.
So it's not going to give Pitty what he wants.
Yeah, it's not
Because
like,
Pitty really needs to know that update manager works and
Yeah.
it can be seen.
no, we're not testing at that level of detail. There are manual tests for it.
So this is where the update manager, beyond the connection part of it, would it be hardware specific?
No, but I think that satisfies those.
No, I understand that, but that would I would call a regression test that we wouldn't cover in the certification, because it's not something you check. It's not a test we would run across hardware to make sure it does work. So once the connection is there,
Yes,
we would not more specific to that image, but that image is certain.
Does it really have to be update manager, or can it just be an update to have, like being able to automatically kick off, get disk upgrade or something like that?
My understanding of his desire was that a naive user would be able to recover from the situation. That was his biggest concern. If he tested nothing else, that what he needed was that there was a way out of the situation that we're putting him into.
yeah, the odds are if that's down, then there's also the discoverability that the web, if you've got no web or problems with it, then the user will not be able to discover how to solve the problem. Anyway, so it needs to be very, very simple.
What are this question just to?
Or automated.
The archive? See if the archive is capable.
I think, you know, some of the tests you talked about, does networking working, is a clear prerequisite to anything else. You know, being able to do get updating and not crap out. It clearly tells you 90% of it's working. The one thing that we can't see from that is with the user being able to see the interface and be able to click. Now, they do have
did effective regression where that didn't work. Like just once. That
no, exactly. So it's not obvious how you test for that without looking at the screen in some way.
Well, if you can
I mean, can we
start
do
at
screen
X
grab, for
and then do a screen grab,
But what
and
would
then
you
compare
do
that
that?
to a.
Why would you do that across all machines? So it is easier to get one person to do it in one machine, check for that.
Well, the problem is we're changing the kernel, which is essentially hardware specific. So if we break graphics drivers, that breaks X.
Or one network.
Or breaks X in such a way that what you see is black, green, or purple, but it still runs. The X server sees
See what I mean? Like, you
It's
can
easy to screen grab.
networking.
That's the problem. I mean, a screen grab is now.
Yeah.
Well, the screen grab will at least tell you that X is at least generating the graphic.
It's something a step further.
It doesn't guarantee that the display is correct.
Yeah, and we do it back to a screen grab.
Information was that.
But see, you might accept, might say, doing a screen grab and confirming that update is on the screen on all the machines, and doing a random subset, say 5 of them at random, and looking at them to make sure that it's physically visible, and do different ones every time.
Yeah, the test for update manager being on the screen is automatable, but the actual visual inspection is.
All right, so
It is, it's just expensive.
who's the contact
Yeah,
point?
KDMs.
Well, this is going to obviously stretch past this movie. Who's the contact point that will be familiar with which parts of the automated testing might apply, which steps might be manual, that we can start forming a list and.
Probably give you data.
Okay.
So I think the segregation test weights, public can contribute to it.
Parts of it are and parts of it aren't. The stuff that's not is not because it's like secret or anything. So if there are things that we need to publish out there, I'm sure we would do that. It's just they're not of general interest.
But I'm just concerned that we don't have any test proposals.
No.
I didn't
talk about
it.
No.
Jerry, I was just going back to something else. Before we move on, in terms of like checking the script capture, I would really like the QA team to help with this because this will be regression testing versus certification testing, and we can share the resources. Like it would be pretty stupid to do another run just to do that script capture, but like the checking and report and stuff like that should be on by the QA team. So we have an action for the QA team to But it seems to me that get on into this, like work with us to identify who would take responsibility for this within. Like this needs to be then reported, so and so on.
Well, it does feel like that perhaps we should, now that you vaguely know what you want, if you can think about it as a team, knowing what you physically can deliver. And like I say, some of it requires visual, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should need to do it on every single machine every single time. To come back with a proposal and say, if I've only got one day, I can probably do this on the amount of things you've said. Is that sufficient to get him to sign off or not sign off?
So that's
We've lost Gabi.
But the biggest impact is going to be in terms of flavors and across all.
Yeah.
The other bit would be one-off exercise to make sure we get the right tests included in that.
Because I can imagine you could randomize some of it, so you do more of it over a 2 or 3 cycles basis than you do in any one, on the assumption that a subset is better than none, and a different subset every time gives you long, over 2 months we've covered everything.
Okay.
So Gabi's dead.
Yeah, long live God.
So at the risk of talking about something that we discussed at one of the last platforms or the last UDS, I can't remember which, we were talking in general terms about subsets of tests, and from my brain, it seems to me like QA conducts a generalized form of testing across the board, and certification would be geared more towards the specific hardware testing to certify those systems based on a QA image. Is that not what we're doing? You guys are doing full battery tests on a brand new image, or are you doing it on a QA image?
It's the QA.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
For SRU, you could say that
It's really close together.
yeah, you're going for like QA phase.
Is there anyone here who can commit on behalf of the QA team?
Anybody from QA?
Yeah. Ours, keep her head down.
We have the SRU testing. So I guess that personal one will be something. We'll work with you to see what we can do and what we see. Yeah, we'll work something out.
Sounds good. So is there actually anything more to say?
Yeah, there was more around process heating. I remember you were mentioning.
Oh, he just walked right in.
Run.
Whoa,
Speak to
I'm
them.
just checking in. What's up?
Your timing was perfect.
He always knows when I'm talking bad about.
I'm going to check on the other sessions, but yeah, go ahead.
So I guess one thing we need to cover is was there was some discussion. Okay, we run the test, and then how does the kernel of the SRU using all the results?
Yeah.
We should talk about that.
I mean, how do we normally report QA? I mean, I assume you produce more than what we see at the release team meetings. That's quite a condensed summary.
Yeah, so what we do every day is we call it hardware certification test, but that's the combination of hardware cert test and QA regression test. They're posted every day when Ronald Vader will post an HTML summary on a per system basis, and more recently, we've started looking not just at desktop, but also netbooks, so you've got all that information. But you're right, from a summary point of view, it's not reported to the rest of the community until the Friday of that week. I don't know, I mean, it's always available, so I suppose it could be in an email notification of some sort, but.
So the results get uploaded into the certification website.
Correct.
And then
It seems to me the useful piece, from a, if you look at it from the SLU team side, they normally use bugs for tracking, and we do have a tracking bug for every SLU, correct? Even if it's for the things that aren't the other, that aren't the specific bugs that are being fixed.
That's
So you always have a
we have
general.
an overall tracking bug.
So perhaps we could use that with like needs verification
Yeah.
complete or failed to come back.
Yes.
So you can put your report in that bug and say it worked or it failed. And that would
Yeah.
give him red or green from the final bug essentially. So they should all then go green. So it would fit with their process.
I like this idea because it sort of fits in well with our current SRU notification process anyway, which
He's not here.
Kitty is very familiar with, and let's see, is Jean-Baptiste here?
Yeah.
And Jean-Baptiste, so I was hoping we could simply use a variation of that mechanism, and then that way we're not inventing yet another communication process. And we've already got the tags there.
Right.
We've already got verification failed or
So I think that would work well.
That's
because
fine.
that one always really shows up as an untested.
We already use the tracking bug anyway, so it's perfect.
Great.
Well, it could be multiple ones, but that probably isn't the problem.
But isn't there already
Well,
one tracking?
I'm hoping it's one tracking bug.
Plus a few other
For
bugs.
each SLU, like if you have the upstream stable update, that's one tracking bug per upstream release.
Oh, but Andy, it wouldn't address the multiple versions of the kernel problem we were talking about yesterday, right? Or would it? How would we indicate which kernels got tested?
you put a comment on it.
Yeah,
Comment, I
which is-
suppose.
I think because the primary thing is that either, at the end of the day, it either completely works and we don't care what you test it, or it completely, something failed and we care only about what failed, essentially.
And that's what it should be positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the end, we care about the difference. If things never worked,
Right.
it doesn't matter.
But we
Just if it's a change to the worse.
If we do
Yeah.
certification, then we shouldn't have that.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would be the trouble.
So I think we
It's a bit
could,
of a word.
I mean, I don't know if that means we either need to mark especially one of the tracking bugs as the certification tracking bug, or if we should have a new bug associated with it, which is a tracking bug for certification for
Is anybody
Testing.
taking offline notes with the Gabi doc?
it just fits. Or let's put VI up there.
Because we only had it once every 6 months.
So we can see if the same once it starts working and never change that.
It's never gonna work.
Usually it works by Thursday, it's pretty disappointing. It's still not.
Well, Thursday's not over yet. Should be fine tomorrow.
I think it went last cycle on Thursday.
It'll work on Thursday.
It'll work on Thursday, so here. All right, let's go back to the.
So yeah, let's.
What we do is at least the generic bugs for stable updates are marked with special tag upstream stable. So someone, if something fails, you could choose any of those marked that way and attach information.
But maybe we should just be creating a new bug called QA, please test this SRU and use that one.
Which SRU?
This SRU.
SRU.
There is only one build.
So,
Right.
Well, are you talking about just having, every time we do a proposed upload, we create a tracking bug for that proposed upload?
Yes.
Yes.
We can do
That's
that.
fine, that's
Yeah.
no
I
problem.
mean, I don't care whether that's one of the SRUs that are in it.
If you want it to be tracked on the SRU updates page, you'll need to make sure it's in the change log.
But we put those, we put the tracking ones on every single one, don't we?
Wonder if it'll,
We put the tracking ones on every single one, and frankly, we can just edit the change log and put tracking bug for this SRU is this bug number, and it'll
Yeah.
appear. Because you can edit the change log and add anything you want.
it's just another checkbox on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So,
So you need to check it in, as it were. Change the change log, check it in, and then doing some changes.
checkboxes on
to execute the test, and we don't know what doing that automatically. Right? So I think we would like to do that at some point soon, but it's not going to be ready next week. We should start doing this next week. So if we, if we had that tracking back, that would be a kickoff for us to do it, and then in parallel we'll work out an automated way of doing it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have a question about this. So we mentioned that we would create a bug for certification to use. You want me to speak up? Wow, that's never happened before. All right, so we mentioned that we asked to create a bug for certification to use in order to certify and give us a report. They use PC cert as a tag for us to know what comes from them. How are we going to make sure that they're able to easily find bugs that come from us to them?
I assign it to someone in that project.
Okay, in this, okay, we can do
That
that.
work.
Or create a project,
Is there a certification project?
Project or something like that.
Okay,
All right.
I just wanted to kind of start it
No,
off.
it's good.
I think he's absolutely right. Let's put an action for the, I would actually say the QA team to decide what their interface is. Because as I see this, we're asking you to do it and you're getting them to do it. Roughly, right?
Yeah.
We're using the implementation, but it's your responsibility as QA. So,
And we want to make it easy on both parties, so that it's something simple, that we know to use, that they know to look at.
right. The great thing is that we're going to change the screen and red and get a see.
Right. And then in that case, maybe all we have to do, if they create a project, is for the bug for the SRU, we simply add an item for certification, whatever.
How about this? Action item for the QA team to find a mechanism to assign the bug to them and track results.
Sounds good.
All right.
And I think it's easy for us to add the bugs, so that's not a problem.
I have an action item for me to define that process.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
we just
how,
make.
how you get notified when there's something wrong?
No, that's up to them. We'll figure that out.
We already have a mechanism for that. The thing will go red on the SLU list. Because under the new system, anything that doesn't change to red or green gets deleted.
Okay.
So
It gets you.
when we move to the second week, everything will be green except for the QA one,
Correct.
which will then either go red or green. If it goes green, we ship. If it goes red, we explode.
I like this.
Yeah.
So it'll actually fit with the QA, the pities thing much
It's a
better
part of the
because
process now.
now he has to release stuff that has green on it instead of going la la la.
The only detail behind that is how we yank it if it does still blow up. That was our discussion yesterday.
Well, I think we already have a process for that.
Oh,
Pidgey doesn't like something, he just deletes it. I mean, there
Okay,
is
so-
already a
so maybe
process
it's
for
that
stuff that
simple,
goes
right.
red in SRU
Yeah, okay.
He just yanks it and we upload something new.
I mean, sort of, yeah. Something new gets uploaded with the things removed, we think, broke the stuff, and then the regression testing starts again, and then it gets to be
Per our discussion yesterday, right.
And that should be fairly easy because we can then move it back from verification failed to verification needed. It suddenly appears on your list again because you're on project Ghibli Gibble for verification needed, and everything sort of works. So I think we can make that work.
Andy brought this up yesterday, but I didn't know if there was a resolution to it. What happens, like, all these tags are great and the project's great, but what happens if the resource just isn't available? Like, what do we do in that case? Like, we know that we have to do it, but we have this window of a week where we have some other tests going on, and we just can't get to it at that point. Does it completely die?
There's two things there. Because the system will leave it not red or green, so it won't get released by accident. It's not going to release it because it isn't green. So it's safe from accidental release.
Well, that's what the red and green is?
Yeah, sorry, if you've ever seen the SOU page, it has like current pending SOUs, and for every bug that's associated with it, it's either grey, red, or green. Grey means that it's something tested, then it goes red, or green depending whether it's succeeded or failed for each verifiable bug. And as you'll be part of that, as you'll be one of those bug numbers, it will either stay grey because you've not finished it, or it will change colour because you have.
Right, but Andy, I think what Amit's concerned about is not that so much as, I feel like every session I attend, there's yet another request for the QA team or the hardware team. Right. And so I'm concerned that when we set up this 2-week cadence, that we're almost thinking about in terms of the ideal, nothing else going on kind of scenario. And I think what Amit's getting at is when the request, or automatic or otherwise, comes in, how
then you fail to achieve it in the time.
Correct. Right.
Well, I mean, the important thing is that we don't ship it by accident.
That's good.
That is covered.
Right. That's
now we're on to essentially a management issue.
Correct.
We've reached a deadline when we wanted to ship something that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we're going to know about that because we track our
This is
SOUs.
resource management.
And we're going to have to fight the resource game. And then that's down to us to talk to management and say, well, it's not working. What do we do to fix it?
What makes it easier is the size of the hardware domain. So what David was saying is it's not just as black and white as we can't. Yeah, if you want to do it over 50, maybe we only have 30 available. So,
but I think we've covered that
we
problem by
covered
saying that we want you to propose what you think you could achieve. So that we can then decide whether that's acceptable or not.
Yeah, so I'm just
because
saying.
if it's not, we then have to take it to somebody with money and say, either tell us to test it, tell Pity we're going to test it less, or give us more money so we can test it as much as required.
Right.
Somebody make a decision.
Being outside the group, we don't even really know what order of magnitude we're talking about for your requirements to achieve that.
And also, given our new bug process, chances are those bugs are going to be on my dashboard, so I'll be able to see them and see their current state. So if you can't get to them, you just say, this has been bumped due to higher priority testing in the QA team. Just give me a comment in the bug and send that.
So you're going to keep track of the individual bugs that are associated with the master bug, is that right?
So what I'm going to keep track of,
Yeah.
I'm going to keep track of certification bugs that we get from them,
Right.
certification bugs that we send to them,
Right.
because those are a higher priority.
Yep.
QA bugs that come from you guys,
Right.
and those bugs that come from release team meetings for the release schedule and things of that nature, those highest priority bugs that we have, I'm going to have a dashboard
Okay.
where if I'm not around, if APW pings me and says, hey, J4, are you around? And he's wanting to check the status of a bug, he's got a single location he can go to see what I've got on my plate.
But I think we should put the bugs that we're sending to them as tracking bugs for testing should be on that list as well.
I agree.
So, just to interject, so the biggest amount for the hardware lab which we like this is the data test. So more on the platform testing, but for certification we should really talk about whether that's really required to run daily tests, or whether we should do we only report them weekly. So in a way, what is the value? Let's have that discussion tomorrow.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So we'll take the whole session now.
Right.
And it may be that you do them 4 days a week and do this the other day.
Yeah,
So I think that's what we want to get from you is what's it going to cost?
I agree, but I think also need to, because we have the hardware in the past and we didn't have this request, we filled the time. So it's not only about how can we squeeze this in, but what can we cut, what we do, which has
What can we-
a
essentially,
space for this.
we-
Well, indeed, and to me, that's part of the cost. And because the responses are, we can do this much in a day, and we'll also will mean we can't do that.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable?
Right, we've got to the point where we now need to cut back on the number of tests that we're able to run,
Test runs.
test runs on a daily, regular basis. Yes, you're right. We're only reporting it at the end of the week, yet they get run, and the whole idea was to catch regressions and breakage ASAP. And we will lose some of that. So that's the balance we have to strike.
But that is exactly what we need you to bring to the table, because that's part of the argument about whether we get more resource or we lose a certain percentage of our daily testing. So that's the
Like a quick action, so for tomorrow's session, would you be able to give us a view on how many critical bugs have been found through that UDS or is that possible? You guys could not have that.
Just more critical. Critical was that we found very certain. Yeah, okay.
Like
There should be a handful, I think.
All right, is this a reasonable wording for the, yet another action item? QA team provide a description of the testing that provided an idea of the number of hours required to provide that testing. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, right, and that would then determine the number of kernels that we can test
That's
in
right,
a
yeah.
certain period of time.
I'll put that.
And I'm assuming we're talking about a 24-hour turnaround. Otherwise,
Actually,
no,
it's
we
like,
put a 1 week period during which we need to know yes, no. The earlier we find out no, the better. But actually,
yeah, I'm
it
almost
is a week.
assuming that we're talking about Monday morning equivalent, and then start assuming that the so-called kernels become available over the weekend. Theoretically, the second Monday we should be able to kick in.
But to be honest, like, we could start testing this in the first week if we have the space.
Yeah.
You know, we need to see also what are the chances that things will get rejected. You know, if you're filtering things in advance, and we have the space, let's put it in because the machines are just sitting there doing nothing.
And that's something else we talked about yesterday offline. Whether it makes sense to sort of start some of the pieces but without the cadence. So we currently have some proposed kernels that you can propose, presumably. Give it a go. Actually have a go at it. See how
I've got too much in this document.
But just for one kernel, for one release, and just to get a view on how expensive it is.
The other thing
Do
is
that next Monday.
it would be, in the future, I hope at some point we get to the point where we're only taking bugs that we know can be verified.
Yes.
And we're actually not dropping any, we're not reverting anything at the end of the first week. So therefore,
That would be ideal.
any testing in the first week would be valid.
Perfect.
Yes, that's the ideal case.
Have we discussed what we're going to do if we find out validation fails on the Friday afternoon of the second week?
We're going to drink all weekend.
We sort of deferred that from yesterday, but it would be nice to tighten that up.
Yeah, that's sort of the same problem in scheduling of what do we do if a security kid killer wants us toward the end of
Well, it's
the
much
week.
worse if it fails. I mean, if this fails, it's not gone to anyone, so we just
hold
go
back.
and debug it. until we
Yeah,
know
so the
answer.
question now is about how to manage the 2-week cycle. Do we slip everything a week and then drop a week? Do we slip an entire 2-week schedule? Or do we
Depends
schedule
how long
it?
it takes you to fix it, so
Yeah.
it's actually usable.
Well, I think what
Well,
we're
but
hoping
then
is it's only
you've,
that one.
Harold, then you've doubled up your QA resources and things, right? You take a week to fix it, and you're effectively into doubling up on your.
Yeah, you got
That's
to
why it says how often that happens.
Right, so it's how it fails. But the reality is if it fails, we're in a really bad place.
Let's wait and see. Let's hope that that's not the common case, and wait
No, I'm
and see.
assuming it's not.
Expect it to be common.
And
It's
you know
gonna
what?
happen.
If we get whacked and we wait a whole entire 2-week cycle and we get it out in a month or 4 weeks, we're still doing better than we've done during the last.
I would have actually
6
found that
months.
bug instead of going.
Yes.
So
times has it happened this year?
we
Rough
were
ideas?
like 12 weeks without getting a stable update out. Not almost, wasn't it that?
Yeah.
Because of kernels that failed regression testing?
No,
No,
because of
it's
security
free, it
updates,
just-
but But we're also taking steps to fix that.
Let's talk about the case though where it fails regression or we find a regression.
Well, that doesn't happen because we don't actually test them.
So we don't know. So okay, so we'll have to. Right.
Yeah.
We tested it, compiled successfully, and then we booted, and we go, hey, look at that, full regression test is good.
So we don't know.
Right.
So we had a proposal yesterday, we actually set up a 3-week cadence and announced 2 weeks.
No, that was like a straw man. I just threw it out there. I say let's stay with the 2 weeks, 2 week, and see how it goes.
So
Except that there will be periodic breaks for holidays and other schedules. What we'll do is I'll work with Robbie and Kate, and we'll sync up. I guess it's all Kate now. I'll work with Kate, and we'll sync up to the release schedule and the Lenaro schedule, and see if we can meet everyone's needs.
So Tony, that'll get you your predictability in terms of, is it gonna be 2 weeks versus 4 weeks versus no answer? So at least we're gonna be able to narrow it down to either 4, 2 to 3 kind of thing.
So one thing we didn't resolve yesterday, and we had some side conversations about, was what do we do with the kitten killer situation?
Yeah, that remains unresolved.
So
Who's taking
we
action
have
on it
15
for the QA team? Is that Marjo or someone else?
I'll take it, but it's gonna depend on, to give the initial estimate.
I just need a name to put in the burn down.
Give it to me.
All right.
What's the limit to do what?
To do the estimate of how long it takes to do a certain set of runs.
Well, we need to agree what exercise on the line.
Right.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Oh, okay. It's actually Victor then.
Or is it sort of?
It's sort of, actually, I'll put it down.
So
it's not a good thing to make sure, just to get it on the list.
Just as
No, you're good.
Yes, to increase. We talked like that actually had in mind.
I think that's right. We need to deal with
Fundamentally, fewer regressions. Is that something that we can manage?
I don't think you have the statistics right now. The number of regressions that at least do the regression process. I mean, yeah, but whether they're valid.
Yeah, we don't record those.
No.
But what we can do is
I don't know if you can look and see when it was done, like regression was completed. I don't know if it's
probably quite slow and stuff.
But moving forward,
It would be nice to be able to evaluate that objectively.
Yeah, we could also like track the number of regressions we detect as from this point onward. The
Well,
same way.
we hope that we'll detect more regressions.
Because in reality,
Okay.
Because it's actually a meeting.
So should there
And
be
you can't close those
target
up.
date
Yeah,
or
some of
something
them.
back with all the information?
yes, probably. So when are we going to get together next, as it were, well, the stakeholders anyway, just to, because there's some, bring this to a table and get it approved by X. We probably should say 2 weeks or.
And there's still are open issues from yesterday we didn't nail, like the kitten killer thing that we were discussing at lunch.
You'd have to remind me.
You know, the whole idea of the kitten killer coming in and knocking the.
It's Thursday or
It's
Friday.
like the worst case scenario.
So if it's Thursday or Friday, if we pass the QA test, we just, actually, we don't have to wait till Friday. If everything passes QA test, we just go right then. And we actually buy ourselves some extra time for the next cycle.
We should know
Oh,
when we're going to have to convey.
that's fine.
If
If it passes, it passes.
the thing, right, to go back, if you're talking about embargo SOUs and security, is that really what you?
Yeah,
Yes,
talking about security trumping something.
something awful happens on
But
the
the most
list.
security that's important
You're
now
still going to want the
is
7-day
embargo,
vacant.
right?
That can't
Would be a fair statement.
Because you're still going to want the 7-day vacant.
Wait, one at a time, please.
You're correct. You're correct. We will not push before Friday because we have to have the 7-day bake. That's the deal we're making with Pity, and he's going to want that. So we can't just push it as soon as it
But
passes.
we do know that it's reasonable to base the security on top of it. And we don't
That's
generally
right.
release security kernel in less than 7 days, because it takes that long. So if we find out about it any time in the second week, the kernel should either have left or failed
Right.
before we're in a position where we're forced to push the security go. Plus which, if it passes it, we should ship it and the security go, essentially. Because we have confidence.
I mean, it depends on how those patches are applied, right? If they were applied on top of the code, not what.
Well, I think if we're in the second week, I mean, the normal rule is that it's in updates, we build security on top of it.
Right.
So probably I'd be suggesting if we're very close to the end of a 7-day period on something that has passed QA. I mean, QA hasn't answered yet, they're in a slightly different place.
Right.
As soon as they've said yes,
just slap them on.
we should build your one that you're going to test with it on the assumption it's going to go out.
Which is what we've done in the past.
That's right.
And then the security
Which essentially
testing
means
is,
they'll go out into security instead of into
Right.
updates.
Right.
and security testing is parallelized because you do it, and so it doesn't require their resources.
Right, although but for the kitten killers, generally we can't put the tests anywhere public, which is why we're forced to do it. But
Yeah.
for all the other security things that are not trivial, we can add regression tests to the existing suites, which is what we've been doing.
Right, and that'll be, but those will be in the normal process flow,
That's what I mean.
but you'll be getting notification of them.
And if we haven't QA in it?
Exactly. Where does regression testing done by a QA or cert team fit with kitten killers?
So one of my most important metrics that I could get from you guys is continued testing of previously discovered regressions. So if I get, hey, we found a regression, then when we fix that, I must test for that the next time. So that if we do find it in the future, we know that, hey, that was a regression that we just found again. And I want to make sure that's the possibility.
So from a certification point of view, that doesn't work because
So,
we
yeah.
always do the same test.
Right, well,
So if we find it, I mean, we will be testing because it's part of it.
but in this case, it would be probably more generic QA, and I guess that's a good question. Because if we have like a general case that fails that we find as a regression, I assume if we find a regression that comes in from a bug that we're not testing for, we create a test for that. And then the most important thing I can get is, hey, we're seeing this in our QA testing, but we don't have a bug on it yet. That's important to me.
Yeah, but I was wondering about embargo stuff,
For security, yeah.
do I have access to that?
For the embargo stuff, it's separate testing.
They already do special secret testing
Yeah.
on the special secret kernels that nobody knows are coming out.
Well, we've got resources for that, though. When you just make it available in a secret location, then I can have it. But the results are secret as well.
But then it's not embargoed.
But we have talked about the fact that to do general testing on security would be also something we'd like to do, even on embargoes.
Right. And there's a possibility that you could do that testing without having any idea what the security update was about.
Because you're not testing for the security update.
I'm just testing a package.
We have to strip the change logs is about the only thing we have to do.
You can strip those from binary packages.
Yeah,
As
it's
long
not a
as
problem.
people understand that those things are private, it's better. I mean, we could strip the change logs, but then
Well, I think
not
we
testing what's actually going out.
But you're testing what's broken. We're actually asking them to test them out.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they don't need to know
That's
what
a
the
good
bug
way to
is,
put it.
or indeed what the embargo date is, or anything else. They
If you
just
can
need to
strip
know these
the
tests.
change logs, go for it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
just
not
delete
in
them
the same
from the
binary.
files and put them back, for the devs and put them back together.
Maybe two things, like those while they're embargoed, the other thing is, I think, to think of is like we come to the test cases that are sufficient, but we also should think of like, is there keep open a way to add additional things to that, if we have like added things to the QA regression test or we have like written something after finding a regression.
Yes.
So I
That
think
is a document way to add things.
I agree. So I think we need to get better. So tomorrow we'll start doing this, but then we need to get better on this. So like what I'm trying to do is tomorrow we start with certification testing as the only testing we run. Going forward, we need a regression test so it gets added, and that's what you were saying in terms of adding things. And that's not certification testing, but that the regression test suite needs to run and grow, and that needs to come from the QA team. In terms of then how it gets scheduled to run or whatever, we can work with Jean-Baptiste to either put them together or whatever, but the ownership of sort of extending it and maintaining it and reporting on that the QA team needs to do that. long term. So I know that we're not there today, and they're one thing, but in the future we should separate them, and certification testing will become really static in terms of what it covers each release. Like the review cycle will be each release. Regression testing should be as soon as we find something that we should be covering, that should be added there. And that's sort of the difference.
Yes.
All right, now we're getting close to the end, so a couple critical questions. We'll get to you in a
Did
second.
we ever answer Tony's?
That's why I was raising my hand. So
So ask the question again.
is there still a possibility that a security kernel can bump a proposed kernel?
Yes.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
can we,
And continuously.
so what about the discussion we had earlier at lunch with Pitty about numbering in order to basically prevent that from happening? Is that a possibility?
It works as long as it's on an API call.
It's hard, it's native,
Is that a discussion you can introduce and finish in 5 minutes?
No.
No.
I mean,
All right, then let's
Tony,
defer that for someplace else.
Or maybe to say, Tony, if there's like not that long time to like go on, isn't there a way to tell customers don't go to proposed?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that what we're trying to achieve with this process is that on average, even if you get done 3 cycles, that's only 6 weeks.
Right.
Whereas right now, if it's 3 cycles, it's 9 months. So there's a difference in nightmare level, right?
Yeah.
So as long as we're not saying it'll be 2 weeks to customers, we're more like, I mean, it's like yours is build block times or whatever it is. You know that's 2 months away and you need it in 2 months. Now, with our previous procedure, we had no hope in 2 months.
Sure,
With
sure.
this, even if we get 2 critical bugs, I mean, if we go through the critical bugs we've had from case this week, these last couple of weeks, we would have slipped 2 weeks.
So
But actually, we would still hit 4 weeks, probably. Not, which is still well within your 8-week requirements. So we're hoping that we won't need it at all, because we're doing things so much quicker, because we've got more confidence so we can ship sooner.
You just have to see how it works.
All right, so the final important thing that I think we have to talk about is I'd like to have a date for when QA and CERT are committed to being able to handle the first cycle of this and turn it around. Can we talk about that before we define the amount of testing required, or can we even have a ballpark now? Because at some point, we've got to turn the switch and start cranking on this.
I was even suggesting as early as Monday, why don't we crank through?
But yeah, I
it's
think
already
we should get
sitting
you
there.
guys to start doing your testing as normal part of the cycle
Right.
and see how it goes. 'Cause
Can't we
that gives
just
you a chance to
experiment
have
and
it.
measure?
That's a perfectly reasonable thing, because we have at least 3 branches sitting in proposed right now.
And you're probably cranking the handle on a random cycle right now, and then testing in the middle of it is kind of equivalent.
Okay.
So it's a different question of when can we start working on this? Yeah, Monday.
Awesome.
Yes.
So we will start working on this on Monday, but when we will be ready to do like 2 weekly cycles, I think we need to understand what the requirements
All
are.
right.
I think it'd be good to see you do a cycle, then you'd be in a position to tell us what you really can do.
Right.
And so the information coming from you will be genuine. So
Right.
perhaps if you can do it next week sometime,
Yeah.
then the week after we can get you guys
We'll come back with
and
more data.
Pitty particularly
Right.
and Steve together
Right.
to say yes or no to the overall cost.
Yeah, we still need to have tomorrow the discussion about
Yeah, there's,
basic testing and
it's
stuff.
only Thursdays.
Cool. Is everything covered apart from that?
Yeah,
problem?
Tony,
Yeah.
Tony's not comfortable with
The Tony, deterministic Tony. Call that a wrap?
Yes.
Everyone, thank you.